Hi, I'm Lenise Brothers, a registered nutritionist, women's health, hormone, and menstrual cycle coach, and the founder of Eat, Love, Move, a nutrition and well-being practice. This is the Period Story Podcast, where in each episode, I sit down with a guest to talk about their period story. We get behind some of the myths and misconceptions about periods and so much more. Now, on to today's guest. On today's episode, we have Maria Purcell. Maria is a commercial business leader with extensive experience of strategy, growth, advertising, sales, and marketing. She is committed to challenging traditional business models and ways of thinking and to helping customers find the solutions that work for them. As a dedicated mother of two, Maria was recently recognized as one of the top 50 sales leaders in the UK and is the founder of The Hood, who recently launched their teen wellness journal, Girlhood, The Story. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So let's get into the question that I start each episode off with. Can you tell me the story of your first period?
Yeah. So my first period, I had my first period when I was 11. And it was pretty much a non-event for me, mainly because I was so focused on something else that day. When my period actually came, I'll deal with that later. Kind of thing. So it sounds really silly. I've been telling loads of people this recently, and everyone always says this really shows my age as well. But 101 Dalmatians had come out at the cinema, and me and my mum had this thing because I have older brothers and sisters, but I'm kind of just always missed out on the stuff that they were old enough to do. So when they were just old enough, I was still too young. So it was like New Year's Eve, I think it was, and everybody was out, doing their thing with their friends. So my mom was like, okay, cool, well, we'll go to the cinema instead. And I'd been so excited about the fact, I love cinema, I've always have, but just so excited about the fact I was going to the cinema. I was like, all day I was obsessed about it. And then just before we're about to leave, I quickly popped to the loo and then my period had started. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem. So I got a pad because I shared a bathroom with two of my sisters. Just got one of their, pads, popped it in, didn't say a word to my mum because I was like, I want to go watch this film. And I know if I tell my mum, she's going to make a big deal out of it and we might not be able to go to the cinema. So I just completely didn't say anything and just kind of carried on as per. I remember having just terrible cramps in the cinema, but really focusing on the fact that I wanted to see this film, which wasn't even that good anyway. But and it wasn't until like months later that my mum found out that I'd actually started my period. And I remember she was just like, oh wait, what? Oh my God. And she felt so shocked that I hadn't said anything. And I was typical young girl. I was like, oh yeah, mum, like it's no big deal, get with it, like whatever. And that was pretty much it. That was pretty much how I started. So, yeah.
Why did you wait so long to tell your mum?
I think, to be honest, at the time, I genuinely didn't think it was that big a deal. I don't know why. Maybe because being with my older sisters all the time, I just knew it was going to come at some point. And also, yeah, actually, I also remember when I did have the conversation with my mum and she was like, oh my God, you're now a woman and all this stuff is going to happen. Do you want to talk about it? And all this. And I was like, oh, no, chill out. It's fine. And she said, I don't get what the fuss is about. I got the pad, sorted it out. And I mean, what? I'm going to have to do this like once a year or something. She was like, what do you mean once a year? And I was like, no, like period like once a year or I don't know, once every 6 months. She was like, no, this happens monthly. And then I was like, wait, what? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, to everyone? Yeah. I was like, and everyone knows this. She said, yes. For how long? And my mum was like, well, for like pretty much most of your life. And I was like, what? And then I remember being like, wow, this sucks. But again, still kind of getting, because at the beginning, your periods are so irregular, right? So they're irregular, so you don't really, put it on. It's only when, okay, yeah, this is really rubbish now. So yeah, I think I was just a bit like, well, it's no big deal, whatever. And then, yeah, very much realised it's a pretty important part of your life once a month for the rest of your life.
And are your sisters older or younger?
Yeah, so I'm the youngest, yeah.
And it part of your confidence around your first period? Do you think it was also because you had seen what your sisters had been doing?
So so no, I hadn't. Me and my sisters were actually talking about this the other day, and I hadn't actually seen what they were doing. There was no talk, there was no chat. Um, I remember one time being at the dinner table and my sister, mouthing off to my mum a little bit, and my mum was just like, "Hey, just because you're on your period doesn't mean you can be a B." Um, and I remember the whole thing being like, "Oh, that was it, really." So no, I have no idea why I didn't think. I mean, we're a bit of a cocky bunch, me and my sisters. We're pretty confident. Three black females, all within a couple of years of each other in teenage years. Not a fun place to be for my mum, but I think I'm just confident about everything, to be honest. And also, I think you had that feeling back then that you kind of just dealt with it. It wasn't a let's enjoy this. This is so special. It was more of a like, let's just get it done and carry on with our lives. So I think that's why I didn't think it was such a big deal at the time. But yeah, no, I'm not sure why it wasn't more of a thing.
And when you had that conversation with your mom and she told you that you get your period every month, how did you then get more education about what was happening to you?
Well, I remember thinking, and this is probably a common theme throughout my life, but I remember thinking, how is this such a big thing and no one talks about it? I remember being like, really, monthly, and this to me sounds like this is important. But I remember being like 11, 12, being like, well, what do I know? I'm 11 or 12. And the first thing I did was talk to my friends, right? So the first thing I did was like hop on my phone and I text my friends being like, hey, have you started your period? And they're like, no. Some were like, yes. I just chatted to my friends about it. And then I played a lot of sports. I was really, really into sport. So I think the people I was in teams, the girls that I was in teams with and things, I think I relied more on the conversation with them because you're naturally in the changing rooms. You talk about your bodies quite a lot because you're athletes. So I think it kind of more came with them. And again, because of that athletic nature, athletes are very much like, if I want my body to do something, I then have to do X, Y, and Z. I have to train this way. I have to eat this way. So I think athletes are just a lot more body confident because they understand what their body responds to. So I think being in that environment helped me just have more open conversations with people. Oh, okay, yeah, I want to do high jump, but I'm on my period. Suggestions? People being like, yeah, just use tampons. And I think I graduated to tampons very, very quickly, which I think, well, from the research that we've done, from the book that we were looking at for young girls, we realized that actually tampons are not necessarily such an early entry product for this age. But for me, and non-applicator tampons are also, very much far down the line. But for me, it was like a non-applicator tampon about 3 or 4 months in, again, because I was just like, well, I need to go swimming. So here we go. Oop, off I go, do my thing. So I think it was my network of friends, like my gang of girls that I hung around with. They were definitely the ones that gave me most of the information, and even products, right? Because we've all done that side shuffle of tampons or whatever, So yeah, those were my biggest inspiration, probably.
Do you think that playing sport? You said playing sports made you more confident, and female athletes are generally more confident. Do you think that had, and did it have any effect on your period?
So I think probably that's why for a while they were maybe not as probably not as disruptive, I think, to my everyday, because I think I had other things I was focusing on. And like, so cramps, for example, a lot of people have really bad cramps and things like that, but I had bad cramps, but then I also had really bad muscle pain in general, from playing sport like every single day. So I think I just kind of lumped it all in together versus, really focusing, which in hindsight, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I'd like focused on it more. But in my mind, I was like, yeah, your body hurts. That's just how it is, and that's you're an athlete. You have to suck it up and get on with it. But yeah, I definitely think I had a lot of girls that were in my kind of circle of athletes, and funnily enough, actually, and I'm not sure if this is a thing, but none of my black girlfriends complained about it. But then I do remember there was a lot of my white girlfriends or my Caucasian friends. They would have like debilitating cramps that they couldn't even come into school, or it was really, really bad. And I do actually remember thinking like, why doesn't it affect me and my black girlfriends? Like, why doesn't it affect this group of girls, but it does affect that? I can't really explain it then, but we were all athletes.
And do you think that your black girlfriends, they had them, but they just didn't talk about them? They didn't complain?
Yeah, I think so. I think, because I've grown up with these girls, and we definitely talk about it now, and we definitely complain about it now. But yeah, I to be honest, I think there was maybe in our culture, there was more of a kind of the things that you don't really talk about, or I think we're black females are kind of given this, you're a strong black female, you're a strong black woman, so I think that's kind of rammed down our throats a bit more, and we aspire to be like that. I know I aspire to be like my sisters who are badass, very strong, physically and emotionally. So I think that definitely had an impact. And also, I think we just had other things probably more important to talk about. I don't remember any of my friends having a day off because it was that bad, or not competing or not playing sport because it was that bad. So yeah.
And did you play sports all throughout school and then university?
Yeah, so I did. I did sport all the way through high school, and then I kind of switched over through college into more dance gymnastics style, and then at university carried on the gymnastics kind of element. So it was at the time it's called competitive cheerleading, but it was like the acrobatic style of it. So there was a lot of being thrown in the air and wearing very tight spandex, that kind of stuff, and doing a lot of gymnastic style practice. So again, very physically intensive, which I didn't stop doing until I was probably about 24, 25 years old.
So there's a lot of research that shows that female athletes who do a lot of intense activity, especially like gymnasts, they have issues with missing periods. Did you ever have that happen to you?
I didn't have any issue with missing periods. I've always been very regular, even when I was like trying to conceive, and after having children, my body goes very quickly back to its kind of template of this is how we operate. So which I've been very lucky in. But I probably from the age of 15 to 24, 25. No, actually probably longer than that. 28, I think. I was on the pill the whole time. And that essentially meant no periods for the type of pill I was on. Okay. And occasionally I would stop, and then I would get a few periods, and obviously they would come back with a vengeance, and I would be like, oh my God, no way. And I go back on the pill again. So there's a large chunk of my early days where I didn't have this kind of appreciation or exploration of my body. In that my female health, I kind of again just like, oh, it's something to be dealt with, and I can have a pill that stops it completely, absolutely, with hardly any education around what I was taking and really why I was taking it. And so when I got to 28 and then I stopped taking it, and then I started to really get into tune with what was going on, that's when I was starting to think about, I was getting married the next year, and I was like, I know I'm going to want kids. I hope my cycle goes back to normal. Like, luckily, but you hear those stories where it can take years and years and years to go back to normal. So, yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have much of that in my younger life, but just basically because it was in my mind, periods was something to be dealt with. Periods was something just to move along.
Yeah.
And deal with whatever and just move along. And the pill for me at the time was the answer to that.
What made you go on the pill when you were 15?
So I think it was one, the no periods.
Mm.
That was a few of my friends were like, "Yeah, I just take the pill and I don't have periods." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds good." Um, Magical pill. But then also, I think the all around kind of, I guess it's all kind of wrapped into one. But the whole education around, sex and getting pregnant and all of that kind of stuff really is rammed down your throat when you're, in that age. It's like, if you have sex, you will get pregnant. And again, when I was then trying to conceive, I was like, that's but if you have sex, you will get pregnant. Here is a pill, do something. And nobody wants to be carrying around, like, going in to buy condoms was like, oh my God, like, I'm going to sweat, like, sweaty palms, and, asking the guy, oh, do you have a condom? Like, all of that rhetoric and all of that, narrative of like just being like ownership of your body and ownership of your sexual preferences just wasn't a thing when you're a teenager. Later on in your life, you're like, hey, no blood, no love. So do one kind of thing. But when you're younger, you don't have all of that. So I think the pill was also a way of all of the kind of female health, all of the kind of female reproductive stuff pushed to the side, dealt with, one pill, go about my life, which is actually quite sad when you really think about it.
You've used the phrase deal with it. You just needed to deal with your period. When you came off the pill when you were 28, how did you transition away from this idea of just dealing with your period?
So I'll be very honest. It took me a long time to actually. Well, actually, the reason why I came off my contraceptive was because I was like, I'm going to get married and I know I want to have kids. And my husband at the time was in the military, so he was in the Air Force, and he moved around loads. We weren't always together. There would be months at times. Sometimes we wouldn't see each other. So I knew it wasn't. I wanted to make sure that timing, if we decided let's go now, we could. Not, I didn't really have that luxury of time. So it was so uncertain of what we were doing at that point. I thought, let me just take it off, and probably in the next 5 years or so, then my cycle will be up to normal. We can start to think about having kids. But actually, the way that things in life never kind of goes to plan, obviously, but the way that things had kind of happened was my husband got shipped off to Afghanistan pretty much straight after we got married. So whilst he was away, we missed each other so much. When he came back, I was like, I want to start this now. I want to get on this baby making thing right now, because we know it's going to take a while, and I miss you. I want to get on with my life. And it actually was really difficult for us, and it took 3 miscarriages before I was able to successfully carry my daughter, Bernadette, who's 4 now. And it was at that point, that was the real kind of when the penny dropped, that I was like, I don't understand my body. And it was a real struggle for me because as I said, like, I was used to being an athlete, and I knew that if I did this to my body, it did this. If I wanted to learn a specific skill, I knew I had to practice, and I would do it. I would get it in the end. So it was very disturbing for me to not be in control of my body, and also to not understand it, because I'm one of those people, if something's going bad or something's wrong, I'm very much like, okay, cool, but what's the plan? Or what's the formula of how do we kind of deal with it again, fix it or work around it? How do we find a solution? And and there wasn't one. And when I was talking to doctors, they were like, yeah, well, just, sometimes it just happens. And I was like, what do you mean sometimes it just happens? Surely there's been studies, surely there is data. And they're like, not really, no. And I was like, what? And I said, could the pill have contributed to this? I've been on the pill for like, however many years. And he was like, maybe. And I was just like, whoa, it was such an eye-opening moment for me. So I basically did what every kind of mum trying to conceive does, and just go like headfirst into Google, Pinterest, anything that I could find of information. And I started to catalog just everything from menstrual health to, diet and nutrition to kind of mindfulness and anxiety and stress and cortisol levels, just everything. And very interesting. And I've never kind of looked back, but that was really the moment that I realized, whoa, I'm never touching anything to put in my body ever again. I will never put hormonal I'll just never touch hormones, basically any kind of medical hormone. I did have to again then when I was pregnant, but that's a different story. But I was just like, what the hell? This is, when you really read about what's in it. I was, and then going through all of the type of things that you put into the most absorbent part of your body. It was a real mind, can't say the F word, mind jump. It was real, and I remember just getting so woke about my female health and really quite annoyed at myself, I think, for not, it took quite a horrible part of my life to actually start to listen and be interested in my own body.
But you know that's quite common. Typically, women who are trying to conceive, that's a point where they come off the pill or they come off hormonal contraception, and then they start to get more in tune with their natural cycle and, what menstruation actually looks like for them, what ovulation looks like. So you're definitely, not alone in this experience. But I want to just go back to what you were saying about all of the kind of extensive tracking that you were doing.
Yeah.
What made you, was it kind of like an iterative thing where you would start to look at one thing and then you would keep adding things on?
Absolutely. I think, so obviously when I first started tracking, and as I've said, I love planning. I love kind of putting things together. As an athlete as well, you make a lot of training plans, you make a lot of that kind of stuff. So to me, I had like a whole like binder journal thing that I would like do, and it kind of made me feel confident and made me feel better about myself that I was writing this stuff down. I could flick through it. So at first it was just periods, like when does my period happen? Like that was kind of it. Period. And then I was doing more reading, and it was like, okay, what's the temperature? Well, what's your temperature changes? And I was like, oh, temperature changing. Okay, it was pretty militant every day taking your temperature. But then I was like cervical mucus. I was just like, first of all, that's a terrible word. Obviously, man came up with that because nobody wants to call cervical mucus. I was like, sure. All right, cool. I'm going to have a look at that. And then it was like, oh, this is my day of ovulation. Okay, this is where I'm at in my cycle. And actually, it was a means to get pregnant as well. It wasn't because I was interested in it. It was, this is a means to get pregnant. And then I had all my I had medical assistance to get pregnant, and then I had to take hormones and things like that because that's what the doctors advised. Again, probably not something I would do again, but that was something that, and then that kind of threw my cycle out of whack. And it was only because I'd been tracking it. And then when I took I had to take quite a few different drugs, but when I took it, I really started to see how my body then went completely out of whack. And so then when I had these mood swings and when I was having like hormonal breakouts and all this kind of stuff, I really did start to connect the dots as to, oh, this is what's happening here. Okay. And I could say to my doctor, no, this is throwing me out of whack. I know this because every month, like clockwork, this is what happens. And I've missed this point. And I remember taking my little scrapbook in and being like, look, you can see what's happening. And so again, it was a means to an end to get pregnant. But then when I was pregnant and then I did have my daughter, afterwards, then there's a whole other kind of stuff of like, oh my God, nobody tells you about all the other stuff that comes after pregnancy and having children and just how your body reacts. And just it's a whole nother podcast. So, but to me, all I wanted to do was get back to normal. So then I really started to more appreciate what that looked like in terms of how do I get back to being me? How do I get back to being pre-mum me? Which never really happens, but in my mind, that's what I was thinking. And my cycle was a massive part of that. So it was a huge indicator of, yes, your body is now back on track. It's not just thinking you're here to feed and host another being. And that's when I started to read more about just the cycle, just to kind of exist, not for a goal, not for anything else, just to generally know what does it like for me and how does that kind of affect everything else I'm doing. That's really was the kind of, I'd say, the second inflection point for me, kind of getting into it.
And all of the information and the tracking that you've done, I know you have a younger child. Did you take that into trying to conceive your next child?
Yeah. So it was very much, I knew that, so for my second child, the kind of goal was I would love to not have to have the medical assistance. I knew there was loads of things that linked with diet and things like that that really, really helped me the first time round. So about 6 months before I was even thinking of conceiving, I was like, I need to get my diet in check. And the diet I was doing was a low sugar diet because I had a lot of inflammation. Again, I think from doing a lot of athletics and things, a lot of inflammation in the body. And so reducing my sugar really helped, just tons of things. But then I noticed again, I was removing all this sugar, and then I actually started to lose a lot of weight. And I think I got down to like the lowest I've ever probably been like in my adult life, just from removing sugar, not from really doing exercise or anything like that, but just from removing sugar. And then my period stopped.
Oh, okay.
And I was loving this diet I was on, and it was giving me so much energy, and like I looked great. I was fitting into my clothes, it was cool. And then my period stopped, and I was like, whoa, I got to stop. This is messing with my body. And so then I started kind of easing up into when my periods then started to come back again. I was like, okay, cool, this is my equilibrium. But again, that's like a whole new like view on food and what that can do and how that connects. So I did take that into account, and I didn't need the medical assistance to the same degree to get pregnant. I did need it much later on in the pregnancy towards the end, but right at the beginning we actually got pregnant accidentally. We were actually like, okay, cool, we'll have a baby. We'll start at Christmas. I ended up having my baby at Christmas. But it was like, we'll start at Christmas and this was the plan or whatever. And it just happened. And again, I do put it down to the fact that, one, I'd had a test run before and I knew what I was kind of doing this time. But also, I was just so hyper aware of everything that my body was doing and not doing. And then like adding that extra layer of nutrition onto and the tracking of what I was eating. So there was a lot of tracking going on. But all that really did then help me find my natural groove, I think.
When you say that you lost your period because you had cut out sugar, was it just sugar, added sugars into food, or was it carbohydrates as well?
Yeah, carbohydrates as well. So it was like sugars into food. It was kind of like a process of elimination. So I was having blood tests done as I was cutting things out, and kind of we didn't really know what it was gonna end up looking like. But the nutritionist I'd spoken to was just like, the best thing to do is just start by a process of elimination. And first it was like gluten, which I was like, so I was like, what is gluten? I didn't even know. And I found I was like, oh, it's in everything. What? Can't do this. I'm Nigerian. What are you doing? Can't do this. But yeah, it was gluten. That didn't really have an effect, so I got the gluten back, which is brilliant. And then it was like sugars, and then it was carbohydrates, and then when it was with the sugars, I saw I did see like a little step of there was like a reduction in my T cells, how they reacted. They just started to get a little bit less aggressive. So I had a lot of them, and they were very aggressive. And then when I took some of the sugar down, they kind of chilled a little bit. And then when I took out the carbs, they pretty much, the numbers of them dropped, and they just completely relaxed. So the levels of inflammation in my body started to kind of drop the more I eliminated all these different things. But then, and also brain fog completely disappeared when I got rid of sugar, because I really suffered from that post my first baby, like brain fog. I would be talking and all of a sudden it just was like, what was I saying? Like completely. And like 2 years later, I was still doing it. So it was a really weird moment for me. But then the really getting rid of the sugars and stuff really, really helped. But then, I was eliminating. Then I knew I'd gone too far when my period started to go very light at first, and then a little bit erratic, and then just it was like 2 months. I actually thought I was pregnant. I was like, oh my god, wait, what's going on? And I obviously wasn't pregnant, and then I was like, okay, let me just, and I've lost a lot of weight, let me just try and put some weight back on and see if they come back, and they did, which
What you're saying is so interesting because, there is a real, especially around with women, there's a real fear of carbohydrates. And
Yeah,
I hear this a lot, if I just cut out carbs, I'll lose weight and this and that. But then what a lot of people don't realize is like how important carbohydrates are
yeah,
for our menstruation and a healthy menstrual cycle. So
yeah,
it's really interesting because a lot of the research around this is actually been done on men. And so
of
things
course.
like no carb diets and also like intermittent fasting, the studies are typically focused on men and not but have not been done on women because the researchers say, well, it's too
Too
quote unquote
complicated. Too
complicated.
other things. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we
Mm.
see lots of things saying, oh, well, the research shows that low carb diets are great, but that
Yeah,
research is on men.
yeah.
So, yeah,
John Doe, 45, 35 to 45, white male.
yeah, yeah.
We are not.
And so, how long did it take you to get your period back?
It didn't take me that long, actually. It took me probably about 2 months or so, I'd say. Because I remember being really worried that I'd done some lasting damage. I remember being like, oh God. But luckily, it took not that, I think because I wasn't training at that point in my life. Um, and I was exhausted because I had a 3-year-old. but, but it didn't take that long, and I knew which dial to kind of amp up. And I did it very gradually. I didn't just switch because I knew that would throw my body into craziness as well. So I did it very gradually, bit by bit. So I think that helped. But yeah, it took a couple of months, but I was pretty. I think I was probably about 4 weeks in before I realised. And then, so all in all, I'd say I had probably a gap of about 3 months of no period.
Okay. And thinking about all the tracking that you've done through your first and second pregnancy, did that feed into the idea that you had for the journal that you've
Oh yeah,
launched?
massively. Yeah. So when my niece, so the whole Girlhood, the story, all came about because my niece started her period when she was 9, and my niece is very different. So you remember I was talking about that confidence that I have when I was younger with my sisters. We still have that. If anything, it's been turbo boosted as we've got older. And my niece is very not like that. She is not yet a force. She isn't like, kicking your ass and on your case and, which me and my sisters definitely were and are. But so for me, as her auntie, I really wanted to connect with her. Anyway, just in general, I want to connect with her and I want to be like, I wanted her to feel that kind of like sisterhood that I felt. She doesn't have any sisters. And it's always been very, not difficult to reach her, but it has been like, how do I kind of get in there without being like, not cool or embarrassing? And I never had this problem with my nephew. He's just like, this is fine. But with my niece, it's always a little bit awkward. So when my sister messaged us and said, sisters, it's happened, I was like, well, she's not pregnant because there would be a national manhunt if she was and I said, what, she started her period? And she said, yeah. And we were like, oh my God, because we knew it was coming. We could see, me and my sisters, we could start to see the changes in her. But even then we were like, yeah, we've got a year or so. So I knew she loves drawing, she loves journaling, she loves like anime. And I loved that when I was younger. I love the drawing and the doodling and making characters and all this kind of stuff. And I also really love now, the kind of mindfulness coloring that you can do and bullet journaling and that kind of stuff. So that's really where Girlhood came from, because I thought, what if I could try and make something for my niece that kind of doesn't feel like it is hey, here's a book on periods. And they're like, Like, we all got that book when we were younger. And it was like 70s style illustrations, like full on frontal nudity. And you're like, oh my God, I don't want this. Get away from me, it's offending my eyes. And I didn't want that. I wanted to give her something where she was like, oh, this is kind of mine. It's half journal, half education. And that's how we talk about it, part journal, part guide. And in there, the first thing we start with the trackers is there is a period tracker in there that you can color in. And again, just by the habit of coloring in, you start to see the shape. You start to see more visually what's happening. I think not everybody is like a data head, and not everybody is kind of doesn't lean to technology. And even on the period apps, I have a lot of period apps that I've used, and they've always been lacking that certain realness to me. It kind of, again, feels like I'm just dealing with it. I'm just putting it into an app and I'm dealing with it. I'm not really exploring what's happening. So we have this mood period tracker, but really the emphasis in the book actually is the mood trackers that are there every month, because that to me is really the hormone signal. When you're a teenager, those mood swings are so much more. If anything, I had more problem dealing with my mood swings than I did with my period. My period was like, okay, well, you bleed, here's a product, there you go, take some painkillers. Moods, there was no product for that, and that has probably more shaped my relationship with my body, with my self-esteem, with my confidence, which in turn then kind of knocks onto how I look at my female anatomy and how I look at everything to do with being a woman. So really for us, the mood tracker was something we wanted to add as much opportunity to color and see a pattern that is kind of aesthetically pleasing, but also feels like you've accomplished something when you're coloring it in. And that's so the mood tracker actually is the more of the focus, and the period tracker is kind of like an add-on to the book. It's in there, but the focus really is the mood tracker, because that will happen for months and months and months before your period actually starts. And we wanted, I think the best way to say it is that when you talk to everyone, and I'm sure you have spoke to so many people about their first period, it's very rare that I hear somebody say they were prepared for it, and that it didn't just happen to them. And most people's first period stories are absolutely hilarious. I've listened, I don't even know how many, because Girlhood, the story has loads of them included. Some really cool women have put into there, but we talk to a lot of people about their periods. I'm known now as the period lady, because what happened? And they're always hilarious, but at the time they're pretty much mortifying or embarrassing. And that's usually because they were unprepared, or they hadn't noticed what was they were prepared for it, but they hadn't really noticed what their body was doing to go, something's about to happen. Oh, here we are. Great. And what we wanted was a journal that essentially somebody could give their daughter, sister, niece, friend before the period begins, so that by the time the period starts, they can start to see, I think I'm going to start my period soon. And then when I do, I know all of this stuff already, and I know where to go. There's even a page in there about all the different period products, cups, pants, pads, tampons, because again, I didn't want my niece to just deal with it. And again, talking about period products, one of the most hardest things to talk about periods is that you have to stick something in your vagina, or in your pants.
Yeah.
Or talk about blood, and that's a lot of where the friction comes from about having those open conversations, because a lot of people can't even say the word vagina. They don't know the difference between vagina and vulva, all of that kind of stuff. And so we wanted to shove that in the book, so it was just it's there. So my niece now my niece doesn't use period, she's period pants, and she knows, cool, on my period I use these pants, when I'm not my period I use these pants. And how easy is that compared to conversation you have with your parents, where they're like, well, this goes here, and if you put your leg up like this, no, it won't fall out, and no, it won't, all of that kind of stuff. It's just a lot more easier. So the tracking element really does guide through the book, but it's wrapped in all of this kind of coloring and stories from other people, and places for them to jot down their own story at the book. It ends with, what's your story? So they can remember it and maybe even show it to their daughters when it's full, or friends or whatever. So that the tracking element, they'll probably graduate to an app as well, which would be brilliant. But knowing a bit more about themselves before, because you put in a lot of data into those apps and you don't really get much back, apart from, yes, it's on Thursday. That's all you really get. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
great, that's good, handy, thanks.
I use an app, my Apple Watch, to track my menstrual cycle, and I got a notification that said your period is due in the next 10 days, and I just thought, like, how is that helpful? You
Yeah.
know?
Oh, okay. So I'll be on alert then. Thanks for 10
Yeah,
days
yeah,
in the future. You will be
yeah,
mentioned. Cool.
yeah. So
At least
where
it's there
can
now. It wasn't there before,
yeah,
was it?
yeah. Where can people find the journal if they want, if they listen to this and they really connected with what it's all about? Where can they
Yeah.
buy the journal?
So, listeners can't see this right now, but I'm currently in the Hood HQ, which is at the top of my house, and I'm surrounded by journals and books because they all arrived yesterday. So we actually did a Kickstarter campaign to kick off actually the Girlhood journal, because we made one for my niece, right? But then lots of people were like, I want one of these, I want one of these. So then we were like, okay, well, let's do a big order and we'll just do a Kickstarter and we'll do. And that arrived yesterday, which was fun for me. So now you can go to wearethehood.com, and on there is the ability to buy the book. It was pre-orders, but now as of next week, it will be that you can order it and get it like within a few days. We'll also be listing it on Amazon soon. Now that'll be going off to the fulfillment center soon. But also on wearethehood.com, you can download. There's 2 downloads. One is the book as a download, just if you want to, because a lot of people have their own binders and stickers and wasabi tape, and they like to customize things a lot. And it's also a lot more affordable, the printable one. So the actual journal itself is £20. We're trying our best to get that lower, but obviously we can only do that when we have volume coming in, so that we can, our aim is to get it as low as we can. But it's a leather bound, comes in 3 colors, really lovely silk coated pages, because we wanted this to be a special gift, not here's a textbook on horrible brown paper. We wanted it to be really lovely, but we did understand that there are people who, like my mum had 3 daughters. She's not about to whack out 60 quid on journals. So we said, okay, well, here's the £5 option, and also it gives more people the chance to customize, add in things that they want. And then also we have a free downloadable, which is just a period tracker, so you can kind of get a taste of what that looks like. It doesn't come with the stories or anything like that. It's just like a one you can print out on an A4 and start to play with, which we've had over 500 people download the free tracker, and about half of them have gone on to either buy the digital download or the book, which has been brilliant. But it's a great way to kind of start the conversation with your daughter or niece or whoever, and say, hey, would this be interesting? Is this cool? Without giving them a full journal. They're like, no thanks. So that's all available on wearethehood.com. It's the only product that we have on the site, so it's pretty easy to find, but should be available soon on Amazon as well.
And I'll put all the links in the show notes. So if listeners take one thing away from everything that you've been saying, what would you want that to be?
I think the biggest journey for me, having gone through this all myself, but then reliving this when building the journal with my co-founder Ramona and the team, very much is, education is power. It's not covered off in our curriculum, so we shouldn't rely on schools and teachers to have this conversation. And I think from a young age, if we care about what's going on with our bodies, not just from a biology lesson or whatever, but from female health, if we can start to install that, hey, this is the kind of the way that you can self-learn, self-teach. So it's naturally embedded in all of us to want to know more about our bodies and want to know more and take ownership of it. I don't think it's about us sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to give you a lesson now on this is how it is. I think we should empower all women to want to know. It should almost be as cool as knowing a different language or as cool as, it should be like, yeah, I know, don't you know, like what the hell's going on? I really think that's how we change the narrative, change the stigma around a lot of female health issues, but or normal, not even issues, female health, like
Yeah.
normality. But I think just having that knowledge, if they haven't read, a lot of people will be a bit too old for Girlhood now. It's kind of aimed more at the preteen market. But a book I would like really recommend, and I'm sure you've probably covered this many times, is Period Power by Maisie Hill. It's like my go-to. I have like I have a whole bookshelf of go-to books for females that I like. I'm always just like, just read this book. Like it's like Becoming by Michelle Obama, Period Power by Maisie Hill. They're like all these, and that one is really good because it's, again, it really does put you back into your shoes when you were younger and your whole life going, whoa, that's why, or oh, I never thought. And it really does help you to then get that hunger to go, I want to know more about this, and I'm not going to accept anything less than this, and this. So self, empowering yourself, young girls, to want to learn about their female health is probably the first step, or the most important step, I think, in really making progress in this area and really starting to just build a more confident, more happier generation of women. Get a book, any book. And start reading and start learning, I would say. I guess if they're already listening to this podcast, they're already on that journey. But
yeah, there's a lot of women listening that are mothers or have sisters or nieces and all of that. So everything you're saying about education and empowerment, they'll be able to pass that on to the younger generation. Thank you so much. Oh, okay.
Sorry, just before you go, I just remembered this. Actually, so we had a load of teachers downloading our resources this summer, and I reached out to one of them and I said, hey, you've got a book, you've downloaded the digital version, and you've downloaded this free planner. I noticed you're at this school. I'd love to have feedback. We're trying to make some more resources for you guys. And she came back with really useful information that I was not aware of. She said, actually, yeah, we're looking to put this on the curriculum next term, because in PSHE, PSHE has only just started to be mandatory in all schools as of this term, which I wasn't aware of. I thought everybody had to do PSHE. And she said, and even then, the female health topics, you can choose what you teach. So, which I didn't know that either. I thought there was like a set curriculum that you had to teach, and that you had to teach PSHE. So even more so, I was just like, whoa. So a lot of parents, I think, assume this stuff is covered off in class. And it's really important when you're talking to your teachers or when you're looking at schools for your kids and things like that, ask them if you want to, ask them, is this covered off? Because if it isn't, then that's on you to really get out there and make sure they have it. And if it is, have a look at what they're teaching, because that moment, it's very hard to undo. To have a look at the resources. There was a mums group on WhatsApp that someone shared our book there, and all 50 of the mums bought the book. And they all bought the book because they were like, I know, I'm taking this into my own hands. I'm not leaving this up. They do not teach this in our schools. So here we go. And they all just was like, boom, done. And that was so empowering and so cool for me to see these mothers just taking it into their own hands and being like, we are not leaving this up to anybody else to educate our daughters on this topic, because it's so important. So I think if you come across that, really, it's something that needs to be addressed, that this absolutely should be taught. There's no reason why this shouldn't be taught in biology. There's no reason why this shouldn't be taught in PSHE. And there should be a really good framework of what's put into schools on this. So that's just the other thing that I learned, that I think I learned it like about a month ago, which completely I thought I knew everything. And then I was like, what? Again, so that's just something for all the mums out there.
Yeah, I thought that it was mandatory as well. So that is very eye-opening. And I think that I don't think that parents should be leaving this to the schools. And that's a whole other topic about the taboos around this. But having the conversation early and often, so your children, even your sons as well, because they need to know about this. I
Yeah.
talked to my son about this, because they need to be comfortable, and they need it. It's about helps them connect with their own bodies.
And my husband, he's been going for the book. I mean, he's been surrounded by period stuff now. But actually, Shauna's dad had an amazing relationship with her around when she started her first period, and he was actually the one that was showing her the products. And like, as well as my sister, he was there too. And I think that also kind of made a big difference for her. But we've had a lot of dads buy the book as well, because they're like, this is I have no idea how to just start the conversation. This is just a great way to just give it to them and say, hey, I thought you might like this. And by the way, I'm here if you want to talk about this kind of thing. Or I noticed, and so we've had such a great response from dads as well, because it's just a nice, easy, and just lovely way to start that relationship off with your daughter, who's all of a sudden become into their teens and not want to talk to you very much. This kind of stuff. It's kind of like a good tool to start the conversation, I would say.
Yeah. Brilliant. I definitely will be recommending it to all my friends. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure to hear your story and hear more about the journal. I will put all the links in the show notes so listeners can find out more about where to get their hands on the journal. So thanks again.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
For more inspiring conversations, head over to periodstorypod.com, where we have so many more for you to peruse. If you want help with your menstrual or hormone health, email me on hello@eatlovemove.com to set up a free 30-minute hormone health review. If you like today's show, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Tag us, come say hi, and send in your requests for who you'd like to see on the show on Instagram and Twitter on @periodstorypod, or email us at hello@periodstorypod.com. I'm Lenise Brothers, and you've been listening to Period Story. Thank you so much for listening.